glad you could join us today on Earthfile. I'm Ayola Kasim. Since 1973, people around the world have been celebrating the World Environment Day with different themes. It was established by the United Nations General Assembly in 1972 on the day that the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment began. This year's observation is under the theme, Raise Your Voice, Not the Sea Level, in line with the UN designation of 2014 as the International Year of Small Island Developing States. Today's Earthfile, we focus on the water bodies, the lungs of our planet, providing most of the oxygen we breathe. The ocean is also a major source of food and medicines and a practical part of the biosphere.
Our ocean covers over 70% of the globe. To date, only a little over 1% of the ocean is protected. An estimated 50 to 80% of all life on Earth is found under the ocean's surface, and the oceans contain 99% of the living space on the planet. Less than 10% of that space has been explored by humans. Tiny marine plants called phytoplankton release half of all oxygen in the atmosphere through photosynthesis. The oceans account for 96% of all the water on the surface of the Earth. The remainder being fresh water in the form of rivers, lakes, and ice. The ocean absorbs approximately 25% of the CO2 added to the atmosphere from human activities each year, greatly reducing the impact of this greenhouse gas on the climate. Total carbon deposits in coastal systems such as mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrass meadows may be up to 5 times the carbon stored in tropical forests. Marine and coastal resources and industries present more than 5% of global GDP, and 90% of the world's trade is carried by shipping. With technological progress, economic activities in coastal zones and deeper waters continue to intensify and to diversify. Yet our ocean and its resources are deteriorating and depleting as it faces increasing pressure from various types of pollution and overexploitation. Maintaining the quality of life that the ocean has provided to humankind while sustaining the integrity of ocean ecosystems requires changes in how we view, manage, govern, and use ocean resources and coastal areas.
Considering that the source of so many of our food forms come from the water, so much of our protein comes from water, all different types of fish, shellfish, mollusks, shrimp, all these things come from the water, and they breed in calm water. That's the inland waters where it's less saline. And if we're now going to continue disturbing their breeding grounds by polluting them and doing sand filling, then we're killing off a very viable source of protein food, which is very essential for human life. If we're going to be killing off our protein food, we're going to have a lot of problems. And research has already shown that a lot of our inland waterways are now suffering terribly from man's impact on them. A lot of pollution has been going on. We all know the stories of the oil pollution and the spills and so on in the Niger Delta. And you know that the Niger Delta mangrove area is one of the most viable mangrove areas in the whole world in terms of biodiversity. It's more profuse. There's so much aquatic life there, and a lot of that has been killed off. And then invasive species like the nipper palm are coming on and killing more. And then there's just the pollution of running boats up and down all the time, the noise pollution in the water, and just the effluent that comes out of the boats. So we really, really need to understand that the waterways, they're not rubbish dumps. The waterways are part of this wonderful, miraculous life cycle that God, the benevolent creator, has put in place for mankind's use. And if we pollute our waterways, then we're poisoning ourselves.
The importance of the ocean is not matched by our knowledge. The fact remains that it is still relatively unexplored. The formulation of sustainable ecosystem-based policies and measures for oceans and coastal needs to be supported by science, including research and observations.
I can tell you this very, very importantly. As far as we are concerned, in the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research, we still can do a lot of things which we are not able to do. The ocean science all over the world is an expensive science. The extent to which we are putting money in science and in the ocean science in Nigeria, we are scratching it on the surface. You can't compare us with a country like China that has 3 ocean-related research institutes and are having the state-of-the-art type of equipment and are continuously developing and training their human resources. We need to key into this by looking at very serious investment by the government and the private sector in investing in serious aspect of funding research. We still need to be empowered to be able to monitor the coastal areas so as to give you, Nigeria, an information on health of our ocean. We are able to have information on the Bar Beach to some extent. Otherwise, as a research institute, we are supposed to be able to give you, just asking for it, we give information of what's the status of our water. But what it takes to do it requires a lot of funding. But let me say that we are starting addressing the issue just recently.
The ocean is a vital source of nourishment, especially to people in the world's poorest nations. Many depend on fish for their primary source of protein. Fisheries and aquaculture support the livelihoods of about 540 million people, that is about 8% of the world's population, directly or indirectly. Overfishing, loss of biodiversity, and the possible extinction of species put a stress on these limited resources. This could lead to famine, increased poverty, and conflicts, including war.
Confront the hard truth that our planet is under threat. Climate change is a real and growing problem. Unsustainable exploitation of natural resources, often driven by greed, is eroding our planet's fragile ecosystems. We are losing biodiversity as more and more species disappear. Short-sighted commercial fishing practices are depleting fish stocks. Acidity in the oceans is threatening the whole marine food chain. When we threaten the planet, we undermine our only home and our future survival. Fortunately, millions of people around the world recognize this problem. They are part of a growing movement for sustainable development. More and more governments are hearing their calls for action.
The ocean absorbs approximately 26% of the carbon dioxide added to the atmosphere from human activities each year, greatly reducing the impact of these greenhouse gas on the climate.
As we consume our natural resources at an increasingly faster rate than we can replenish them, we have unwittingly become a massive experiment with the planet's ability to support our continued existence. It has now become a widely accepted public policy paradigm that humanity's future material advancement must be consistent with the tenets of sustainable development.
When CO2 dissolves in seawater, carbonic acid is formed. It is this chemical reaction that leads to ocean acidification. Ocean acidity has increased by 30% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Ocean acidity increases the amount of energy needed by small ocean organisms in constructing their carbonate shells and structures, and in some places will make it impossible for these organisms to live. It causes seawater to become corrosive to the shells and skeletons of numerous marine organisms, affecting their reproduction and physiology. This will have impact on ocean ecosystems that science is still examining. Within decades, the chemistry of the tropical oceans will not sustain coral reef growth, while large parts of the polar oceans will become corrosive to carnivorous marine organisms. Land-based sources such as agricultural runoff, discharge of nutrients and pesticides, and untreated sewage including plastics account for approximately 80% of marine pollution globally. Marine habitats worldwide are contaminated with man-made debris. Oil spills remain a concern, though actual spills have decreased steadily for several decades in some parts of the world.
Again, there is no proper checks on effluent from industries. And this is something that, here where we are, the Lagos state government needs to enforce and should be continuously monitoring what people are putting into the lagoon. Obviously, it has a huge knock-on effect. I mean, you never know what half of the effluent, what is contained in half of the effluents, whether there is mercury or whatever. And of course, this affects the whole food chain. And you see the local fishermen out there where the colour of the lagoon is almost bright red. And somebody should be looking into this to see what is being pumped into the lagoon, because it's going to have a health hazard in the long term.
In this country, there are guidelines on industrial discharges. So as we sit here now, there are these guidelines that were drawn up by FEPA of those days, that maybe for a particular chemical, the level in the discharge coming out from your factory must not exceed ABC. Those ones are there. But in terms of enforcement, I would not be too confident to say that the enforcement has been thorough, but the regulations are there.
Government should be enforcing the what is discharged into the lagoon. Individuals can never do that. Individuals, your local fishermen, as I was saying, they are striving for a living, so they will catch fish irrespective, which are then passed on to the consumer. You don't know what those fish are containing, what sort of harmful heavy metals the fish are containing. And so this should be checked as well. Obviously, everybody likes fish. We're in this coastal area. And of course, we have the same effects offshore. The level of pollution is high. You see, as we were saying earlier, you see the oil on the beaches because the discharge from a lot of the boats that linger offshore, sometimes for weeks on end. And again, it needs for these laws on pollution to be rigorously enforced.
Excessive nutrients from sewage outfalls and agricultural runoff have contributed to the increasing incidence of low oxygen areas known as dead zones, where most marine life cannot survive, resulting in the collapse of some ecosystems. There are now close to 500 dead zones with a total global surface area of over 245,000 kilometers, roughly equivalent to that of the United Kingdom. The excess nitrogen can also stimulate the proliferation of seaweeds and microorganisms and cause algal blooms. Such blooms can be harmful, causing massive fish kills, contaminating seafood with toxins and altering ecosystems. Litter can accumulate in huge floating garbage patches or wash up on the coast. Light, resistant plastic floats in the ocean, releasing contaminants as they break down into toxic microparticles that animals mistake for food. Fish and birds can choke on these particles, get sick as they accumulate in their stomachs, or become entangled in large debris.
one thing is that